This is Dead Serious, a show about short horror stories worthy of discussion. I'm Dead Palette, and I'm reading Suicide Squidward-related stories, Hillenberg babies. Today we're going to be taking a look at Squidward's Suicide, (rewritten). This is being hosted at the spinpasta.wikia.com website, and it is a complete rework. Before, I read another version that was just hosted on the website. It was the same classic version. I was going to see if there were any changes. No changes in the last version. It was just the typical version. But right from the outset, we can see that this version is going to be significantly different within the first 5 words. Okay? Let's get right into this. I work as a janitor in a small company. Clients call us and request our services for a day. It's a normal job, just like any other. So that's the first paragraph. So we have a weird problem here, which is that a lot of the time stories will get into trouble for front loading and saying, it all changed that day. It was all normal until that day, which everything changed. Rock, monkey, movie. This is the opposite. This is just like, I work as a janitor and it's a normal job and life is normal. That's a weird way to start out a story where something weird is going to happen, you know? It's a hard balance to strike, but this is falling on a bizarre side of it, if you ask me. We got a call by Nickelodeon Studios a few days ago, and I was the not-so-lucky man that got sent to clean and help. I took it as another day of work, nothing important. The studios were just like any other place I have worked in. I was marked as somebody invisible that would be gone before the end of the day. What does that mean? That is a bizarre sentence. I was marked as somebody invisible that would be gone before the end of the day. I think what they're trying to say here is nobody paid attention to me. I was practically invisible because I'm the custodian. But they decided to word it in a particularly dramatic way of like, I was marked as somebody invisible. But c'est la vie, let's press on. I emptied every garbage bin and dumped the contents in a plastic bag, ready to be placed in the big dumpster in the back of the studios. I lifted the bag and dropped it inside the dumpster, and caught a glimpse of something I hadn't seen before. That's weird. It's like when I was taking out trash, I glimpsed something I hadn't seen before, is a better way of stating that in a very plain manner. I managed to place the garbage bag on the side and pick up the object. It was a CD with its case not broken as the ones I had seen in the bins. It was unmarked and apparently new, no indication of its contents, if any. The executives barely looked at the CD before saying with obvious annoyance at my interruption of his activities, if it was in the trash, then it's obviously worthless, isn't it? Obvious? I looked at the case, deciding to check if it was empty and working, so I could give it an use. Bit of a run-on paragraph, but I am nothing if not guilty of that myself. Clumsy wording here, but sort of a believable dopey character of, going to, someone important at the company and saying, look at this CD, and they're just like, dude, what are you doing? But an executive? What? You're taking this to an executive, not, someone a little lower level? You're a custodian. This is a little silly. But it's starting to shape up like it's not a, rewritten, oh my god, I'm having a speech impediment now. A rewritten version of SpongeBob. It's Squidward Suicide. It's starting to sound like another take on it, like another aspect of the same story. That night I placed the CD on my computer. Nothing happened, because computers it doesn't work by osmosis. And I wasn't surprised to see that it worked perfectly. It was unusual. What was unusual is that it was full of content. A CD being full of content? Wow. After scanning it with antivirus, I clicked on the directory, which was called SpongeBob in all caps, and I was greeted with by about 7 files, all of them their file name with something generic like 01. What do you mean about 7 files? That is a weird phrase. It was either 7 or it was some other integer a positive integer that wasn't 7. I opened the first and found out that it was an episode, one I had seen on TV. It was nice to laugh at SpongeBob's antics. This is like weird Russian writing being translated, like trying to come off as American. It's like, it was nice to laugh at capitalist SpongeBob's antics. I had no doubt that the rest of the files would be more episodes, so I planned to give it as a gift to for my nephew. I watched other videos without finding any anomaly, just more episodes. Nothing wrong, until I reached the 5th one in the list. So it's weird that we start off this story with, I'm just a janitor, nothing weird and out of the ordinary, and then the rest of the story so far has proceeded to be like, I didn't find any abnormalities. There's like this weird presumption that we're going to find something out of the ordinary when the story is not setting up for that. It's very bizarre. I watched the nice intro. SpongeBob has the nice intro. Until he got to the title card, which was titled Squidward's Suicide. I had never heard of that episode before and felt uncomfortable about it. Are you a SpongeBob expert or aren't you? This is something that needs to be detailed beforehand. It's like, it turned out to be a SpongeBob DVD. And I love SpongeBob, so that was great. And it's like, we need these details here. Maybe I could put the rest of the episode on another CD. If this episode is unfit to be watched by children, I thought, that does not seem like normal human behavior. Squidward was practicing his clarinet while SpongeBob and Patrick played outside. The usual scenario for this story called Squidward's Suicide. Be quiet, SpongeBob. Oh, I'm doing it wrong. Be quiet, SpongeBob. I have a concert tonight and I need to practice, he yelled. SpongeBob replied and left with Patrick to see Sandy, allowing Squidward to continue. The scene changed after the bubble animation, and now Squidward was playing his clarinet in front of an audience, comically hitting some sour notes. I chuckled while the concert ended. This is a bizarre side effect, because I think this is written by a young person who doesn't know how to write an adult, but the side effect of that is that it's sounding like an adult that never grew up, and I don't mean like me, like a man-child or something. I mean like one that never grew into maturity of a situation. Of just like, I'll give my nephew a weird bootleg CD as a gift. That is bizarre, childish behavior. You know what I mean? I chuckled while the concert ended. The audience murmured for a few seconds, wondering what they had just listened to, then started to boo him. I paused the video and examined the audience, as I felt there was something off here. The audience seemed to be normal, except that SpongeBob was in the middle of it, booing, something I hadn't thought he would do. I couldn't find anything else, so I continued watching. Then it hit me. It was the sound. There was clear malice in the protests and voices. Way beyond a caricature, there was this close-up of Squidward's face, who looked clearly aghast at their reaction. The video cut to black, just enough time to be noticed. What do you mean, just enough time to be noticed? The video cut to black, just enough time to be noticed. The screen went black, just enough to be noticed before it transitions to something else. The original Squidward Suicide does such a nice job of like really setting up the scenario, and this is like trying to mimic that and ape it in a way, but it's so bizarre in that there's no emphasis on the audience, and it seems that this writer just was like, well, I know better. I'll cut out the hyper-realistic eyeballs thing that everyone makes fun of, and then the story will be great. But what is actually happening here is that the nuance of the situation, the audience booing this guy for not knowing how to play the clarinet, and the depression and the anguish that is felt in that moment, the cringe that you feel for Squidward is not there. The surreal nature has just been dropped entirely. It's just, this has now just become another episode of SpongeBob minus the fact that SpongeBob is also booing, which is unlike him. Other than that, there is nothing surreal about this scenario, you know? The episode continued. Oh, did it? Now it was a shot of the bedroom. Still night. Squidward sitting on his bed, inexpressive. Whose bedroom? Are we Squidward's, I'm presuming? But could be SpongeBob's, you don't know. It seemed like there was no sound. I turned on the speakers to the max volume and still didn't hear a thing. Squidward covered his eyes with his hands/tentacles, and started sobbing softly, just enough to be heard. I watched while it zoomed. You watched, did you? That's all the story is. I don't understand that phrasing. And started to hear what at first sounded like ambiance, but then I realized it didn't fit. It was like a breeze in a forest, trees moving and leaves being crushed. The background sound got stronger. A single frame flashed. It took me several tries to be able to pause at the exact moment, but then I regretted it. I saw the image of a child's corpse, slashed and with part of its entrails out. I felt the bile rising to my throat and continued with the episode. I wanted to erase that image from my mind. Wow, see, that's the weird thing, is the original story takes some time to meditate on this moment, because it's a shocking thing, and it's given weight in the room, and here it's just like, wow, that's weird. I better continue with the next paragraph. It's lacking the actual shock of it, because we're reading this and we just know what's going to happen. I don't know. It doesn't function properly. One note that I do like, an addition that this story has, is the detail about leaves being crushed. That sounds cool. That's an addition that I would like there to be in the original story. That's a cool little detail. It implies that the audio is being taken from wherever the photographs were being taken from. A child being murdered in the woods and then being dragged to pavement, or vice versa. But again, the details about pavement and the killer's shadow have been completely ripped out of this version. That is so bizarre to me, but leaves the child murder, just doesn't do anything with it. Squidward was still sobbing, and a red tint leaked from behind his tentacles. A red tint leaked from behind his tentacles. It looked like blood coming from his eyes. I hoped that it didn't mean they were gouged out or something similar. Put yourself in this position, and in this scenario, and this is happening to you, you're watching this. How would you phrase that sentiment of perhaps the eyes were gouged out? Would you say, I hope that didn't mean they were gouged out or something? That's bizarre, clunky phrasing that doesn't convey what you're trying to convey. It's like, I sure hope something spooky doesn't happen. Same thing with red tint leaked out from behind his tentacles. There is this desire to use words that are more verbose than they need to be, and in the process, you end up using words that are improper, like tent. Tent shouldn't be used there. The sound got stronger to the point where they started to overlap the sobbing, and I heard a deep laugh mixed with the wind. The screen once again blurred, and another frame flashed, and after doubting, my curiosity got the better of me. Oh, Jerry symptoms. The screen once again blurred. Okay. I paused in that moment, and after closing my eyes, I pressed the button. After closing my hyper-realistic eyes, I pressed the button to continue. I had seen another dead body, this time a girl, almost decapitated. It's so weird here, because you can see the thought process of the person rewriting this so very transparently. It's like, the original story kept having eyeballs pop out. How uncreative, they just kept doing the same thing over and over again. I know what I'll do, I'll have the girl be decapitated. It's frustrating. I didn't pay any attention to the details. I kept my eyes closed. The episode, while I kept my eyes closed, the episode continued. The sobbing turned into full crying. I would say that there's crying and then there's sobbing. Like, you would say full-on sobbing is more severe than crying. It's okay. Racking my nerves, something way beyond the purpose of the show. When I dared to open my eyes, I saw Squidward remove his tentacles from his eyes, still crying desperately. They were filled, the eyes filled the center of the screen. Despite the crude drawing, there were tiny details around the eyes that hinted at much more than a mere drawing. Again, we're trying to get away from the phrasing hyper-realistic eyes. That's what they're doing here. Again, their intentions are very clear. But I gotta say, not necessarily a bad sentence. No replacement for the original, but despite the crude drawing, there were tiny details around the eyes that hinted at much more than a mere drawing. That's not bad phrasing. That, that is alluding to the idea that maybe those are, real eyeballs that have been traced over, that have been pulled out of children's heads or something like that. That's not a bad, insinuation to make. But I think the original story was lightly insinuating that itself, without, the dramatic rewrite. I could see the pain, depression, and repressed rage behind the pulsating eyes, perhaps more than the concert scene would have provoked, blood still leaking from his eyes. Again, not really bad phrasing. I mean, this story has long since shit the bed, but those are not bad phrases being used here. Another frame flashed, this time for enough time to be noticed before I paused the episode again. A third child, as mutilated as the other two. Then the sound of wind exploded, forcing me to lower the volume. Then it disappeared. Squidward was silent too, just looking directly into my eyes. I watched, scared, while the scene panned out until I could see Squidward's tentacles, a shotgun between them. Okay, I need a pause here for a second of, the subtlety in the original story of, it was almost as if Squidward was looking at me. Now he was just looking at me. It's implying something more supernatural than the original one was. A shotgun between them, a voice spoke, the same one that had laughed before. "What are you waiting for? Do it," it said slowly. Squidward looked down at the shotgun. I'm sure it took less than a few seconds, but it felt like an eternity. I watched as Squidward placed the shotgun in his mouth and pulled the trigger. I closed my eyes instinctively, and when I opened it, there was only the remains of Squidward's head, his eyes still open. The episode ended there. This person is like trying to avoid Jared sometimes by like, I closed my eyes, and it's like, no, it doesn't count. You were still continuing the journey. But the staccato moment of do it is now replaced with, what are you waiting for? Do it slowly. That's so bizarre that you would take impact away from that moment. It's like, what could he be doing? What is it that they want him to do? I stared at the screen for several minutes, wondering what I had just watched. This didn't fit the show. Neither the characters nor the scenes. I considered giving the CD to the police so they can investigate about the dead children. But then fear filled my body. I took the CD out and broke it in half. Of course you did, pal. Then again, and put the pieces into my trash, where they belonged. I had no idea if its content is related to Nickelodeon. I'm sure that they would never allow this. I want to forget about that thing. But I still have this image of Squidward's eyes deep in my mind. I want to forget. Well, writer of the story, I want to forget as well. Credited to Why Am I Writing This? Let's take a quick look at some of the comments. Blarfsnartenblurg writes, as a person who hated the original, this is a sigh of relief. It gives a simple solution as to why and how the narrator managed to find the episode. There are no mentions of realism or hyperrealism. Again, that's all this is to appease people. It's like tank controls. It's like, man, I hate these fixed camera angles and tank controls. And then you get rid of those, and everyone's like, man, Resident Evil should go back to having tank controls. It's like, well, everyone complained, and the games are selling better now than they did before. So, and you're the same people, so don't give me that shit. The episode and the narrator's reaction kind of go hand in hand, especially in the narrator's description of Squidward's infamous eyes. Also, except for that moment, no unnecessary emphasis on the eyes. Unnecessary emphasis on the eyes in a story about eyes. The ending kind of bothered me with the whole narrator breaks evidence cliche, but it wasn't that bad. 7.8 out of 10 for you, my good sir. This person does not understand what they are reading quite. I'm just going to be frank with them. Awesome Trinket says, way better than the original? No, absolutely not. And thank you so much for not adding the video that was on the original. The thumbnail for the video scared the crap out of me so much that I fell over backwards, taking my chair with me. So I pulling the old Alan Chaney. So I was slowly scrolling the arrow keys and didn't get jump scared. Thank you so much. 10 out of 10. Original 5 out of 10 would have been 10 out of 10, but half off taken due to the jump scare. I have no idea what this person is talking about. Spirit the Fox, gulps and shit myself. Way scarier than the original 10 out of 10. Some guy, 8 out of 10. Lol Masters, this story deserves more views as well. More views? What do you mean views? These weird narrator people, man. Fatal Disease, this deserves more recognition in my eyes. What? This deserves more recognition in my eyes, Nick. Yes, that's right, Nickelodeon. You've been put on watch. This story deserves more recognition. Boy howdy. This is a trip. So I think this as a comparison for the original, is interesting. Specifically because it tries to avoid what everyone says that they hate about the original and comes off way worse. I hope that in my previous analysis of the original, people could get a glimpse into why the story is the way the original story was the way that it was, and hopefully this elucidates that even more. That what was there being stripped out, the end result is just this weird jumbled mess of a janitor that acts childish. It's quite interesting. This temp. Let's make this clear. Temp janitor, not just the janitor, not just the temp. A temp janitor has an in with a Nickelodeon executive enough to have a meeting with him about a blank CD found in a trash can. Oh boy. Now if you enjoyed that, remember to blow the brains out of the like button and subscribe to Dead Palette here on YouTube to be notified when another Dead Serious video comes out, as well as my original horror stories, narrated by myself. Check out toospooky.com, that's TOO spooky.com for original horror stories, and follow me on Twitter and Tumblr, links to everything in the low bar. If you really enjoyed this stuff, consider my Patreon as a way to support me. Thank you so much for your time, and now on to our sponsor at this non-moment in time. The Salty Spittoon. The Salty Spittoon. All of the flavors we could be. We choose salty.